This entry in the Path to Electronic Trading series is sponsored by CQG.
Came into the industry in 1987, right after the stock market crash. So my background was technical. I was an engineer by training. That's what I went to school for. And I loved digital signal processing and wave theory. And when I saw the stock market crash, I just thought, that's a puzzle that I would love to try to solve. So I knew one guy that was a trader on the Mid-Am. And after riding the elevator for a couple of days, filling out applications, trying to get a job, I paged him on the floor. And he got me on, gave me a tour, and I ran into Shatkin Trading, needed a runner in the Mid-Am, and I got a job as a runner. There was plenty of opportunity to work. I worked an off-the-floor desk, learned all about the foreign markets. I spent time working over on the Merck floor. I did afternoon out trades. I did morning out trades. I became a balancer. I worked an arb between the Mid-Am bonds and the London bonds in the morning, and then we'd go between the Mid-Am bonds and the Board of Trade bonds during the day. Pretty much anybody that would hire me to do anything that could support my trading, I would do. When I came into the industry, I said I'd give myself 5 years. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had no family that had ever been in. We really didn't know anything. So I said, I'll give 5 years, and if I can't make it, then I'll go get a real job. So my real job was a night computer operator for Iowa Grain Company. And that was in 1992. Again, no knowledge of electronic trading or no thoughts of it, but I was an engineer who was working the night shift. I had an AS400 at my disposal and honestly a lot of free time. Night processing back there took a long time, so you waited around. So that was an interesting combination. I had all this firepower in the computer and I was interested in technology, and so I started looking for problems to solve. The first problem we solved was transmissions of statements and prelims to customers. Back then, there was no internet, so everything was done through Western Union. We were playing around with satellites, but it was a one-way transmission. We would send the file out, it would go to a modem or some device that would be connected to a dot matrix printer and would print out, and they would fail all the time. So every night we'd send them all out, and then every morning we'd call some customers and brokers asking for resends. It was expensive. It was low quality, it was time consuming. So we came up with the idea of turning it around and having customers dial in and pull the statements down. And then if they had a problem, they could just come in and pull them down again. And wrote a small automated program that would log on at 3 o'clock in the morning and download the statement. And it worked extremely well. It was a win-win-win because we cut down on costs at the FCM. It was better service for the customer, and there was no resends in the morning. And that was really got me hooked on, hey, there's something to using technology to solve problems in this industry. Working nights, I had all the data in the AS400, so I knew all the positions and trades and everything. But everything was still batch processed. The statements we sent out were end of day. There was no tracking of stuff during the day for the customers. And we thought, why can't we do the same thing? Why can't we create a statement on demand? And so that's what we did. Using the same technology they were logging in with to get the nightly statements, they could log in at any point and ask for any individual account or set of accounts, and we would grab the raw data and create a temporary statement on the fly. And that was a huge hit. And that really got the customers to start thinking bi-directional, where they were coming to us using technology to get more information instead of just previously all the communications were over the phone. They would call up and ask what their position was. We had that real-time account inquiry. We added margining to it so we could really get a snapshot of what was going on, and the risk department loved that. And then we started thinking, okay, what are the other holes? And the other hole was we don't know what orders the customer's working. So we've got a customer that may be going on margin call intraday, and they've already got liquidating orders into the floor that just aren't filled yet. So we wanted to get all the orders, the open orders, and working orders into the system as well. But it was all about risk. It wasn't about trading. And our first approach, even then, wasn't to build a trading system. We decided to go out and see what was out there, and we figured we would buy or license somebody else's trading system and connect that to our risk engine. So we went out and we looked at what was out there on the market as far as trade entry systems. PATS and Theodore, and think TT was just coming on, but they didn't do the pit stuff. But we couldn't find one that handled risk that we wanted to, because as you looked at the trade entry systems, they had clip sizes or maybe even maximum amounts all day, but none of them tracked the customer's position. So if they put an order in, you didn't know if they had the money in there, they had the buying power. And then it all kind of opened up to us. We realized we're doing this because of risk. And each of these is individual pieces. How do we track the positions? How do we track the margin? How do we track the money in the customer's account? How do we track the trades that are working? But it's really a whole ecosystem of how do we track from start to end of what's going on with the customer. And we can get a lot more benefit if we did it all as one piece. And that's when we decided to add the trade entry directly into what was our risk engine. And that was a huge benefit, because we already knew exactly what was in the customer's account. We knew exactly how much money was there. We knew what the margin was. And so we said, if we're going to add this functionality, we're going to do it with the goal of getting every trade into this system before it ever goes to the pit. And back then it was all pit. Luckily, at the same time, the CME and the CBOT were coming out with tops. So there was CME tops and there was CBOT tops, and they were separate, but eventually they joined them together and worked together. It was perfect for us because we didn't have to worry about the floor portion of it. All we had to worry about was the customer input, managing the risk, and then routing it to the floor through tops. But we knew that eventually we wanted to do all the exchanges, not just the Chicago exchanges. So we designed the system that we could take inputs from any system, run it through our risk engine, and then send it out to any system. And that's really what became the idea for Oak. And even the logo started to look like a tree with a bunch of inputs coming into a central unit and then going out to a bunch of locations. After they did tops, they realized the benefit, and then they started developing the Cubs devices and the EC and Comet and other electronic order routing systems. And then eventually became electronic order trading with Project A and ACE and Globex. But even then, it was the CME and the CBOT were driving adoption of these new technologies. So we became very close with them. We beta tested a lot of stuff for them, the Floor API, the Order API, and it developed into such a tight relationship. They actually licensed Oak and they put it out as eOpenOutcry. This was in 2000. At one point, I think we had 56 FCMs that were routing orders, and it was pit trades only. By that time, we already had ACE up, and you could have done electronic, but this was only routed to support the floor access of electronic orders. We eventually did something similar with the CME. They didn't want to do order routing, but they wanted to support their FX division. So we did electronic order routing of their FX orders between Globex and the cash market for one of their divisions. But always about supporting the exchanges, because that relationship was key. Change is a contact sport, and we really had to work to get adoption. Customers were afraid their orders would go into the ether. Brokers and phone clerks on the floor didn't want anything to do with this. They thought it was going to take their jobs. Even our back office and our risk staff was worried because the systems would go down. I mean, TOPS wasn't the most stable system. Our system at the beginning, occasionally had problems. So we did a bunch of things to drive the adoption of both sides. We mandated it on the floor. Every order that was taken had to go through Oak. The wheat desk was right next to the wheat pit, and they couldn't understand why they had to take a phone call. They could flash it in, but they were required to put the order into Oak and then get the fill out, put the fill into Oak before they can call it back. But what that did is that made it easy for the customer. We didn't have to mandate to the customer or even incent the customer to use the system. We simply told them they could use it to get their fills out. And they would open it up, and they'd call the floor, place an order, they'd see the order pop up on the system. A while later, they'd see the fill pop up on the system when the broker put it in. And then 20 minutes later, they'd get a call from somebody with their fill and realize that they could just cut out the middleman and do it themselves. But regardless whether they put it in themselves or our phone clerk put it in, what we knew is as soon as the record was in the system, for the whole rest, all the way until it was cleared, booked, and in their statement, there was only one single source of the truth. It was that same record. So costs went down, risk went down, There was no key punch errors anymore. Everything came in from the first place it was put in and tracked all the way through. And so Iowa Grain's volumes on the system grew dramatically. I don't have the numbers anymore, but we hit 90% of our order flow coming in through Oak in a relatively quick period of time, way ahead of expectations. And customers really enjoyed the freedom they had to always know where their position was, and always know what was going on. TOPS was a system that came from outside the industry. I believe it was the SIS package, the Security Industry Software. And it was brought in, the CME brought it in first, the Board of Trade shortly thereafter. It wasn't fit exactly for the futures market, but it did fit pretty well. And it went to ticket printers. There was no devices on the floor, there was no other routing. They did hook the two of them together, the CME and the CBOT TOPS, so we could route orders in through either one and then send them to the other. We were primarily a Board of Trade shop to start off with, and our first orders, I think we routed the first order externally into TOPS. TOPS had been up and running for a while, people could put the orders directly in, but we connected Oak to it and routed the first grain order in. We were not the first at the CME. But we had both those going, and we could route to all those places. We had ticket printers, TOPS ticket printers off the floor for handling other exchanges, New York and Minneapolis. But the breakthrough was when the exchanges put the broker devices on the floor and we could route directly to them. So the EC device and the Cubs device, that was a big difference because now it eliminated the stop at the desk, it eliminated the stop from the runner, it eliminated the punching the fill back into the system. The order went directly to the pit and the fill came right back out. So when we first heard about that development, we were all over the exchange, and I wanted to be involved. I wanted a beta. The EC device to me was one of the biggest breakthroughs the Board of Trade had from a technology point of view. After that, once we had order routing there, then we got into being able to route to side-by-side trading. Then there was the Eurex and Board of Trade Alliance. There was Globex, Globex 2. At one point, I think we realized I had 5 different paths to route a treasury bond order. I can go through Board of Trade TOPS, through CME TOPS, through the Floor API, to ACE for side-by-side. And if you added on the different telecom paths, it was even more than that. Unfortunately, we needed that many paths because things would break. You'd come down in the morning, you hear the announcement on the floor that the TOPS system, or the order routing system, was down, delayed opening for 20 minutes. But there was plenty of options and alternatives to route to make sure those orders got in. The TOPS printers were custom printers. There was actually 2 models, the A model and the improved. I believe they were called DocuMax printers. And they were unique because they printed off a ticket and they would cut right at the right spot. So you rip it off. It was duplicate or triplicate was the form feed. So you could rip it off, send it into the pit, and keep a copy at the desk. But they were not fast. I mean, they were dot matrix printers. So it was, write a line, advance the paper, write a line, advance the paper. So when it was a busy day, those things would start going and the orders would back up behind them. And it would just be a stream of orders constantly coming off of them. Our goal with Oak was never about trade entry. It was about getting all the trades into the system so we can manage risk and compliance and auditing and historical record keeping. So any exchange or any platform that would take an order, we wanted to connect to. If they had an API, we would connect to them. So besides routing to all the floor systems and floor API and eventually order API, we wanted to route to Globex, we routed to Eurex, we routed to ACE when Eurex and the Board of Trade had the alliance. Eventually we routed to Winnipeg, which was interesting because nobody traded grains electronically. Since we were Iowa Grain, when we wrote all the software in the front ends, we put grains in on the electronic side too, even though there was no place to trade grains electronically. So the formatting, the quarters, the eighths, all that stuff. And then Winnipeg one day just announced in a very short period of time, I think it was less than a month, they were closing the floors and going all electronic. We were one of the few platforms that could actually support routing grains into an electronic matching engine and streaming bids and offers back out. So I remember getting on a plane with one of our lead salesmen and flying up there and meeting with a bunch of customers. And for several months, we were, besides the exchange's own system, we were the only one that was routing orders in there. And it was just being in the right place at the right time. If you look at any system, from the time that a good or a service is produced to the time it's consumed, there's multiple steps. And if you try to automate one individual step, you get some benefits. But there's still the same handoff between each step and lack of efficiencies. The benefit comes when you automate multiple steps and you start tying things together. And that's what we attempted to do. It wasn't about electronic trading. It wasn't even about showing statements. It was about, from start to finish, giving the whole life of a trade and the status of an account, knowing it at any time through a common platform that was all automated. And that is still the way we automate everything today. It's what you see in every successful digital transformation. Is not a series of individual steps being automated. It's a whole ecosystem being automated, or as much of it as you can. And that's where you get the benefits of 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, 2 + 2 = 5 or 7 or 9. And you have to look at it from that point of view. If I automate this and I automate that and I tie them together, what other benefits can I get? I can route orders, great, but I can get trade entry, I can get compliance, I can get auditing. I can always know, I can get better customer service. I can stop the customer having to wait a half hour to find out whether he's filled, and he can see it instantaneously. All those are benefits that came out of automating it, but weren't about trade entry.